I highlighted 4 examples that you can see on the screen. And what I'd like to do is I'd like, in the time that we have, to talk about 2 of those examples. So the first one I'll talk with you folks about would be the one on our top right quadrant, where it helps expedite credentialing. That's the process. You could also call it onboarding, if that's a more appropriate term for your organization, but it's really the process of bringing those providers in the door, making sure that they're able to provide care for the patients in the manner in which is intended or requested, and then certainly reappointing them into their areas of practice, depending on where you're at, you know, either 2 or 3 years, every 2 or 3 years. So that process alone has a dollar figure associated with it. In the United States, on average, the cost figure that's associated is about $7,000 a day that they can identify that every day it takes to onboard a provider into an organization and make them available. The cost for the organization is about $7,000. So with that said, if you're an organization of any size, the goal is really to integrate the whole process so that you can onboard those providers as rapidly as possible. And it takes many different teams to be effective in doing so. If master data is present within your organization, you have the capacity to make that early on data about that provider while they're still in an applicant kind of status, available to certain applications downstream so that they in turn can provision access and they can kick off processes and they can start the onboarding, so they really can expedite that process and alleviate a lot of the manual components that take place with onboarding and managing providers' core data. In addition to that, there's a lot of other examples, but you open up, let's actually transition over to the top left quadrant, where it talks about streamlining and centralizing reporting and developing key enterprise data assets. So in that particular case, kind of toggles back and forth between 1 and 2, both of those top quadrants. The example that I was going to share with you guys is that once you have master data in your organization, you've got that data asset. Again, it could even still be small, where maybe you're sharing a dozen attributes with the organization on a daily basis. You really open up those communication channels with even payers and the health plans, exchanges, whether it's a health benefit exchange or other exchanges you participate in. Even organizations that are looking at or considering the idea of participating in blockchain, you have an asset available to you that can be used. You can make that data available then to those external downstream systems in a same day environment, next day environment, and it can be current data. No longer are you running into situations where you're missing certain values because you have those things available. So you're not sending over data where you're missing a degree, you're missing a specialty, you're missing an NPI, or maybe it's a residence NPI instead of the actual providers. All of those scenarios can be resolved through the development and the management of the master data. And then in turn, when you think about, again, the top left quadrant around streamlining processes, you think about the number of individuals in the organization who are having to go and query data and find data and wait for data to be available to them. No longer do they have to have those lead times. And then if you employ data scientists and they're no longer having to identify what data sources they should be using, instead they have a curated data set that's available to them.